Liz Berry, thank you so much for coming on the YouTube channel. We're talking about your poem, which comes from this collection, Black Country. It is or it was the winner of the Forward Prize for Best First Collection 2014. That must have felt good to win a prize with your first collection of poetry.
Yeah, it did. It was sort of a great delight and also a great shock to hear Black country words suddenly appearing absolutely everywhere.
I bet. Well, we're looking at the poem Homing. So just to start off with, what inspired you to write the poem?
So I grew up in the Black Country in the West Midlands, sort of the area between Wolverhampton and Birmingham. And many of my poems are rooted in the language of that region. Although the West Midlands isn't actually an area known for having lovely language. In fact, year on year, it tops polls as the least lovely and appealing accent in all of the British Isles. But I think it's a really beautiful language. And I think more importantly, it's the language that is and was spoken by so many people that I love. And so I wrote home in after my nan died. She had a really beautiful, strong Black country voice. And to me, it was just one of the best sounds on earth, really warm and tender, funny, poetic, but also really inextricably linked to these feelings of home and belonging. And when my nan died, I was in my 20s and I was just starting to write seriously, to take my work seriously. And suddenly I looked at all these poems I was writing, all these poems I was reading, and I asked myself, where were voices like my nan's voice, these beautiful voices? Where were voices like my mum's voice, like my sister's voice? Where were voices like my voice? And I couldn't find them anywhere. And so I wanted to start making work that really celebrated those Black country women's voices, those vernacular words, and to see what happened when you brought the sort of the vernacular of the West Midlands into lyric poetry.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, the title connects with the final image in the poem of homing pigeons. And obviously, homing pigeons find their way back to a place of belonging or origin. Now, how does the speaker do the same thing in the poem? And what does it tell us about the importance of home?
Well, I absolutely adore pigeons, especially homing pigeons and tumbling pigeons. And they appear quite a lot in my poems. They appear in poems like Birmingham Rowland, Prince's End, and Bird. So I've got a sort of a real fascination with them. And I think homing pigeons in particular are really remarkable creatures because they travel extraordinary distances away from home. They're really resilient, and yet somehow they manage to find their way back. And I think the magical thing is that we're not entirely sure how that happens. So in the poem, I wanted to make that link between someone leaving their birthplace, leaving their language, leaving the accent, perhaps moving far away from it, but then being brought back again, being brought back home by language, by these gorgeous vernacular words. And I suppose the love and identity that they represent. So yeah, the pigeon just seemed the perfect symbol for both the region and for that sort of being pulled back by language.
Yeah, actually, I didn't make that connection, but there are a lot of birds in this collection, aren't there? There was the one about I am a bird, wasn't there? When I became a bird, the first one, bird. Yeah, oh, fantastic. So your poem is part of the Worlds and Lives cluster on the AQA exam board. And the exam board have described that as saying that the poems are rooted in the revolutionary spirit of the Romantics. So your poem sits alongside Wordsworth's lines written in early spring, Shelley's England in 1819, not 1918, let me say that again. Shelley's England in 1819. So how do you see homing as being rooted in the spirit of the Romantics?
I'm incredibly honoured to be in the company of Shelley and Wordsworth. And I've never ever thought about this connection before, but actually it made me think back to the Romantics and it reminded me that we often think of them now as very safe and traditional poets, don't we? They become so sort of embedded in our culture with their daffodils and sort of dreaminess in the Lake District. But actually, if we go back and have a real look at them, they were in their time real radicals and revolutionaries in all sorts of ways. Um, and so if I think of harming, I suppose I can connect it to that way that Wordsworth wanted to use, what was it? like the words of a natural rhythm of life lived daily. And sort of I hope that's what Halloween celebrates, this extraordinariness of ordinary, everyday language. And I think I also hope the poem tries, as Wordsworth tried sort of very radically back in his day, to bring the poet's language nearer to the language of man, or I
Yeah.
suppose in my case, the language of women.
The speaker in the poem wants these words to spill out because they've been locked away and suppressed. So, what is the importance of remembering and embracing one's heritage?
Well, I think the answer to that question would be different for everyone. It's different for all of us. But I think for me, perhaps because I'm a poet, language is really deeply linked to my feelings about my home region. So my love for it, my questions about it, my unease about it, my longing for it, the things that elude me. And through language, we pass on so much, don't we? We pass on our stories, our identities, our history, what it means to come from a place, what it means to leave a place. And I think it's really important for me and important to remember that vernacular language, using vernacular language, especially writing using vernacular language, it's a form of resistance and a rebellion, a way of pushing back against the standard and these ideas of what constitutes proper speech or proper literature. Um, and I think coming from the Black Country, that's especially pertinent as sort of the language and voice of the region has been so maligned and denigrated over the years. It's always seen as something comic. It indicates you're ineloquent or foolish. So by embracing these words, remembering them, putting them into a poem, passing them forwards, it's a way of lifting up that language and saying, look again. I think it's really beautiful.
There's some industrial imagery in the poem. And how does that contribute to the themes of belonging and connecting to one's roots?
The Black Country was the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution and went on to become one of the most heavily industrialised regions in all of Britain. So it feels impossible to write about roots in the Black Country without drawing upon that imagery, that language, as it's so important and definitive to the area. And I think especially when we're talking about roots and identity, and in the poem I'm thinking about my nan and her generation, as actually they were a generation that saw the sort of the peak of industry and then the slow decline of that world, which is also a really important part of the poem, what it means to reach back and hold on to things which are being lost.
Okay, so just something on structure. I saw that things interesting. The line, how now, brown cow, is on a separate line. And I think that highlights the difference between the sort of received pronunciation of elocution lessons and the dialect the speaker so loves. And in this collection, the structure is one of the things, structure of the poems really jumps out because some of them are so, sort of, well, they're so different the way they are structured, the poems. So how did you decide on the structure of this poem?
Well, when I'm making a poem, and I think it's really helpful for people to hear this because we only ever see the finished sort of perfect published poem. But when I'm sitting down to write a poem, I almost never sit down with a form or a shape in mind. In fact, all of my poems begin their life as what I would think of as free writing, sort of a loose prose. And then they gradually find their shape and form as I move them through sometimes many, many stages of drafting. And I think for me, it's helpful to think of form or the shape of your poem as the body that carries the ideas and dreams of your poem out into the world. And so that shape, that form should always help it create its effect, help it conjure its magic in some way. So, example, you might write a sort of a tender lullaby using these intimate little couplets, or if you've got a poem that you want to create a feeling of urgency or panic, you might have big one long disjointed enjambed block. Um, so the form in this poem really just found itself through those various drafts. And if you look at the poem and the way the stanzas are broken, bit by bit the story moves on through each stanza. And sometimes they're linked as the idea follows through. But that how now, brown cow line all on its own um, is honestly one of my favourite things ever to read out loud. because when you read that line, how now, brown cow, the Black Country pronunciation and vowels are so delightfully resistant to the RP standard that would have been taught in elocution that it always makes audiences sort of laugh, and immediately we're on the side of the speaker and on the side of the poem and their lovely voice that's resisting this elocution.
Well, with that in mind, would you read the poem for us? And we'll pay specific attention to how you read that line.
Oh no, brown cow. Homing. For years, you kept your accent in a box beneath the bed. The lock crusted shut by hours of elocution. How now, brown cow? The teacher's ruler across your legs. You heard it escape sometimes. A guttural oh on the phone to your sister. Saft or blot. To a taxi driver unpacking your bags from his boot. I loved its thick drawl. G's that rang. Clearing your house. The only thing I wanted was that box, jemmied open, to let years of lost words spill out. Bibble, fiddle, tie, wom. Vowels ferrous as nails, consonants you could lick the coal from. I wanted to swallow them all. The pits, railways, factories thunking and clanging the night shift. The red brick back to back you were born in. I wanted to forge your voice in my mouth, a blacksmith's furnace. Shout it from the roofs. Send your words, like pigeons, fluttering for home.